Oh, hello, hello, hello. Hello, guys. Hello, hello. Good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Today is a beautiful day. I'm assuming it's about to rain again. So, we will study. We will study. Right, so yesterday I finished setting up my structures. And today we will continue doing this.
I'm going through it, and again, I'm really going to be breaking up the loading all the container here. We're going to content articles used by a site because there's lots of different information out there on it. But the main way you can think about it, if it's not being used inside of a section of a main section of your content, so a div is not a main.
It's a side,
content,
okay.
And the side is sort of a secondary information for your whole page. So if we come and look at this, this is the main content. And then I have the secondary stuff with
Aside.
little widgets that are showing up on the side here. So this is secondary, this is the main content that I want people to do. So the aside can be that. As we go through and find other situations, hopefully we can understand a little bit more how things like aside and main do work. Main is the easy one though because it is the main content, and that also means you can only have one main per page. Main is an important element to use on a page, and it can actually affect the accessibility experience of people that are visiting your website because they use assistive technologies, and one of the things those can look for is your main. There are literally people who are blind that visit websites, so there are programs that will read things out to them. This could be blind or just have very bad vision, and it will read the page out to them. Or it could be if you have an injury and you're having trouble using a mouse and you're using keyboard navigation, things like that. Having your header and having a nav and having a main and an aside, this really can help the experience some people have on your website. Now the main has very good browser support, but older browsers, including Internet Explorer 11, which people still use, don't understand it. So if you really want to be good, you can also add the role of main on there as well.
So yeah, designing HTML and CSS is really based on this, the program that they use and the device that they use.
It's not required for newer browsers. If you do want to support some older browsers such as Internet Explorer, then you want to have your role of main on there as well, so I'm going to leave it. Now if this is a little bit too much, or you're like, this isn't what I'm here for right now, that's cool. I'm going to put a link in the notes though for people who are interested to the Ally project, which is A11Y. Which is short for the Accessibility Project. It has lots of information on accessibility and best steps you can take in putting your website together.
What is it?
Project, which is A11. I'm going to leave it. Now, if this is a little bit too much, or you're like, this isn't what I'm here for right now, that's cool. I'm going to put a link in the notes, though, for people.
Links in the notes. Is it this?
Who are interested to the Ally project, which is A11Y. Which is short for the Accessibility Project. It has lots of information on accessibility and best steps you can take in putting your website together. It is a fantastic resource to keep on learning and learn about part of the web that's super important, but that not enough people focus on. With that little sidebar out of the way, on my aside, I am going to give this a class of Sidebar. Now the reason I'm doing that is I'm not just keeping the aside, it is possible for websites to have multiple sides. Unlike the main, which you can only have one of, an aside can be used for a few different things like I mentioned. So because of that, just like a div, I'm always going to give it a class. An aside, I'm also always going to give a class. That sort of works out for the main content that we have here because I've put in these two columns now, and we have our footer here at the bottom.
Wait, I need to see that note. It sounds really interesting. I need to use better semantics, HTML code, because according to what I see from me, it is pretty bad, because all I use is div, nothing else. No main, no side, no. All I use is div, so it would be really nice.
These two columns, and we have our footer here at the bottom. Be a little bit unique. It's gonna have its own. They have put text files for everything.
This is the Adobe XD.
And give these classes. But for this page is all these articles that I have on Coded. If it's not being used inside of a section of a main section of content, so a div is not a main section of content, and the side is like a side, and we'll read things out to them. This could be blind or just have very bad vision. Internet Explorer 11, which people still use, don't understand it. So if you really want to be good, you can also add the role of main on there as well. It's not required for newer browsers. If you do want to support some older browsers, such as Internet Explorer, then you want to have your role of main on there as well, so I'm going to leave it. Now, if this is a little bit too much, or you're like, this isn't what I'm here for right now, that's cool. I'm going to put a link in the notes, though, for people who are interested to the Ally project, which is A11Y. Which is short for the Accessibility Project. It has lots of information on accessibility and best steps you can take in putting your website together. It is a fantastic resource for the main content that we have here, because I've put in these two columns now, and we have our footer here at the bottom. Let's jump into our main and start adding a few things. And once again, there is a new element that we're going to be exploring, which is the article. And I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to do too much explanation on it. But it is when you have an article on a website, the article element. Saying this is
so article is like a,
and an article sort of a self-contained little element. So when we're inside of an article, if I put a heading, so say I put an H2 in here, it's the heading for this article, and they know that that heading is related to this article, which is really cool and really useful. So it's a little bit self-contained compared to other things. Now if we come and look at this article is a little bit different from the other three articles we have on the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this first article a class of article featured, and then on these ones here, I'm going to give them a class of article recent. And I'll explain my naming in 1 second. Let's just add this onto those ones. So first I'm starting with article and then putting featured.
This is way easier to understand than my code. My class is main content, main text, main.
So when I have in my CSS,
it's bad.
I'm going to have my article featured and my article recent. They're not going to be separate from one another. Like, I'm keeping everything together. It makes my CSS a little bit easier for me to read. If you prefer putting featured article and recent article because that's how you'd actually say it, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I prefer starting things with sort of the name of what it is. It's almost like when I do a modifier class of button and button accent. It's my article featured and my article recent. So I know they're both articles because that's the first thing I see, and then I can see, oh, it's different because this is my featured one or a recent one. In this article, if we take a look at it, I have my image first, I have the date, then I have a title, a paragraph, and the last but not least, I do have the continue reading. I'm going to do something a little weird though, and I'm not going to put them in this order. So we can explore something else with Flexbox when it comes time to style it. And because we want to sort of follow best practice. The very first thing I'm going to put in here is the H2, and I'm going to give this a class of article title. And close H2. After my article title, now what I'm going to do is put my image. So we need an SRC on that, which we'll get to after, and an ALT, which we'll do after. And we're also going to add a class on this of article image. We can follow that up with a paragraph. And actually we need two different paragraphs because we have one for the date and one for the rest of the text. And then we need my link down at the bottom. On the first paragraph, there are two different paragraphs, but we're using them for two different things. This one has the date and how many comments the post has, and this paragraph here is just sort of like a regular paragraph. So on this first one here, I'm going to give it a class of article info. The reason I'm doing info is because I'm going to put the date and the comments in there, and not just have one or the other. So we can do, so if it was just the date, I could call it article date, or if it was just the comments, we could do article comments. I'm just going to call it article info like that. Then we can come down to this one. I'm going to give it a class, even though I don't know if it's really necessary. I'm going to call it article body. And the reason body is body text. If you're coming, I do come actually from a print background. Regular text you see in an article is the body text. But also we have our, that's why we have the body. The body of the page is the body text of, so it's like the main content. Don't know if I'm actually going to end up styling it, but you sort of get the idea that I'm using a class for everything here. When I get to my CSS, that way I know it's super easy select anything that I want to select. So then I also have this down here. I'm going to give this a class of, I'm going to call it read more instead of continue reading, just because continue is really long and I'll probably make a typo, and it still gets the same message across. So I think that works out fine. Now again, the order of this is not the same order as here. If you did it in a different order, there's nothing really wrong with that. The reason I'm doing it in this order is, imagine if somebody were to come on this page and for some reason the CSS doesn't load. If they get it in the actual order and they see the content in the order that we see here with no CSS, the hierarchy and the order things are in, they're not really the best. We have this useless sort of information first, to be honest, followed by the title. Also, imagine if you're using a screen reader and it's just going one piece to the next piece through this, and it reads this and then it reads the title. It's kind of weird. The title first, and you know if you're interested in that without knowing the date that it was published first. So I like putting it this way, and we can actually use a cool flexbox technique and feature to change the order of things here visually without impacting the actual order that they are in the markup. So this actually makes more sense when you're looking at it from a content perspective, but with the styles we can change the order of it all, which is really, really cool. Now these recent articles, they're a little bit different, so I'm actually going to break those down in the next video. I was planning on doing it in this one, but I don't want to overwhelm. We already went through quite a bit there. So in the next video, we're going to look at this, because if we go and look at it, oh my goodness, we actually have 2 columns in these. So let's see how we can handle that. In our recent articles here, as I mentioned right at the end of the last video, we actually have 2 columns. Oh my goodness, that complicates matters now, doesn't it? So I'm going to come in here and create 2 divs, one for each column, div, close div. But this first column here is going to have a class on it of article recent main, and I'm going to give this one a class equal to article recent secondary. So it's like my main content and the secondary content of my article. Now, if you don't really like those names, maybe you could come up with a better name for them. A lot of people don't like the idea that I'm repeating article recent. I don't like the idea of just using main and secondary, because maybe you have a main and I have a secondary for something else too that are just completely different. Could you, instead of doing it this way, have an article recent and then use a descendant selector, your compound selector, to say like article recent main space main and article recent space secondary? Yes, you 100% could. And I like trying to avoid those descendant or those compound selectors when I can. So I'm going to use my main and my secondary on this. It does create
main and secondary
name to have to write when we get to our CSS. It does also make my CSS really easy to read and understand when I'm working in it. So I do like that, even if it does mean being a little bit more verbose. The main content here, this is where I'm going to have my H2, which is going to have the same class as I have here. Sometimes a featured article will have a different font settings, but right now it's the same font size, the same font color, the same font, everything. If these 2 different articles have different font sizes, I'd be looking at this in a completely different way. I'd be giving this one featured article title and this one recent article title or something like that. It's the same, they're both the exact same styles on them.
This is really semantics. I like it.
That makes a lot of sense. Inside of there, I also have my body and I also have the continued reading.
Extremely semantics.
We can copy all this and paste it in here.
I need to learn how to name class name, because that is really make the website look semantics. It's easy to understand, easy to read, and using all of this new tag like main, side, article sounds like a really good one. I have to learn that. Need to be more diverse with my tag. And class name, looking at this class name is really understandable, really easy to understand, and it actually makes sense. It's not like mine. I used to name this main text, and then main text image, and then main text info, main text body, main text something like that. It's not good. It's not good.
Like before, these have the exact same styling on it as they do up here. So we keep the same class names. Once we've styled it, we've styled the whole thing. The main difference between our featured article and this one is just the structure of them is a little bit different.
Structure.
So you can have the 2 columns in one, whereas the other one doesn't have the 2 columns in it. These 2, I can grab and I can throw in this secondary over here. they really are the secondary information.
Secondary
and now that I have
information.
one of those built, well, I can just copy that whole thing and paste it right here. There's all the structure of that. In the next video, I'll take a look at the aside.
Okie dokie.
The sidebar is actually going to be pretty easy to set up. Pretty much because we have just two different things to create. They're really, really simple. We only have one thing to actually create in all of this, which is, I'm going to call it div class equals sidebar widget. Now, if you are going, Kevin, just call it a widget. Go for it. You can call it just a widget. I just want to be super explicit that this widget is meant to live in my sidebar. I don't think I'd have a widget that would live somewhere else, but when I'm styling it up and when I have it, I just want to be really clear what this widget is actually being used for. We have two widgets. So the widget, if we come and look back at the design, the widget is the thing with the big gray background on it.
Yeah.
And then inside my two widgets, so it's one.
It's like just a background colors.
Content, and it's really not that much. Let's just separate things a little bit. The first widget here is going to have a H2 on it. And the class will be, I'm just going to call it widget title, because if I put sidebar widget title, people would start getting mad at me. I think widget title is fine. It's very straightforward to what it's being used for. I do have an image in here, so we have our SRC and our ALT that we need. And then in this case, I have a paragraph. So you probably guessed it, I want a class on this too. Let's call it widget body, close paragraph. And then I have my other widget over here. Now this widget is a little bit different. I have the same styling on this as I do on this one, but the content's a little bit different. I just have an image and a title. So what I'm going to say is this widget sidebar here, we're going to start off with one thing which will be an H2, just like before, to have the class of widget title, close H2. And then instead of having an image and a paragraph, we have a few, like, they're sort of like articles, but they're not really articles. So I don't think they deserve to be called an article. So I'm just going to use a div class, and it's going to be called a widget recent post, close div. And we have 3 recent posts. I'm just going to do one, and then we'll copy and paste it a few times. For my widget recent post, the reason I'm doing a widget recent post is if I come and look at it, I have an image, I have a title, and then I have an underline. Image, title, underline, image, title, and that last one doesn't actually have an underline, so we'll have to figure out how we can turn off an underline on the last one. It's not something hard to do, but it's something new and really cool that you can do with CSS. I always get excited about the CSS parts. These markup parts aren't as exciting. But I digress. Let's go and look. So what I would do here is, I'm going to put my H3 in this case, and the reason I'm doing an H3 is because they are a title. It's a title for the post, but it's a subsection to this. So recent posts, this is like the category recent posts. And then I have these 3 different recent posts that are in there. And once again, I'm putting my H3 before the image, and one part of it is because I really want to practice that thing with Flexbox where you can change the visual order of things. And I do think it does make more sense to have it structured this way with the title followed by an image. If you did it the other way around, though, it probably wouldn't be the end of the world. So this, do we give it the really long title of widget recent post title? I'm going to keep the widget recent post title. If you wanted to shorten it up, if you're doing your own site and you said widget post title, I think that would be perfectly fine. I don't think there's any issue with that. The reason I wouldn't want just post title or the reason I wouldn't want something that doesn't have the word widget in it is because I wouldn't want people to get it confused with this article recent, because we have article recent and then just article title here. So if we only put something in here that involved the word recent, say recent post title, that can really get confused, and when you're looking at it, you think it actually belongs up with my recent articles. It's very verbose. What's wrong with being a little bit verbose? It just makes your code much easier in the long run when you know exactly what it's being used for. So I don't mind being a little bit verbose. If you have a shorter way of writing it, or you can come up with a better name, there's nothing wrong with that. By all means, come up with shorter ways of writing it. I might be a little, if this was a personal site that I was doing, I might try and come up with things that are a little bit shorter, just because I don't like typing. But when we're learning especially, I think it's super useful to being super clear what things are being used for. And it is a good habit to build up when you're coming up with your class names. It does make class naming a little bit harder sometimes, but it's usually worth the trouble. So my image has a source on it, it will have an ALT on it, and it will have a class on it. And you know what? I forgot to put an image, I forgot to put a class on this one. Now I think both images are going to be treated the same way, so I'm going to call this one widget image, and with all same one on this because the two images will be and pasted a few times.
Okay.
Right now, in the markup is wrong. Looking at in the videos, we're also going to see a little bit more on the images and how we can crop them properly. We have most of the tools you have to be able to do the site. If you don't want to do the text, I'm going to do it all off camera. When we start the next video, all of the text will be in place and all the images. So we're going to be getting started with the CSS. I'm so excited by this. I love working on big projects like this and sharing how I work on big projects like this. And while I can't see the work you do, I'm excited for you to challenge yourself and to have some fun with this. Here is that Adobe XD link again, just in case you've never opened it. I do think it's going to make your life a lot easier, so I would really encourage you to click through and use that to get the specs. But if you'd rather, I'm going to keep this slide open. The nice thing with the Adobe XD version of it is if you go on the home page here, you can zoom in on different parts of it and look at them in a little bit more detail, which might make it a little bit easier to work on. In this video, we're just focusing on the global style, sort of setting the stage for everything. It is going to take us a little while to get through all the CSS that we need to do on this one, but let's jump into it and actually get started. Because it is the first time we're looking at a big project, I am going to start. Now, if you want to do it on your own, by all means, do as much of this on your own as you can with what you have and with everything you know. As I've already mentioned, there are a few things we have not covered yet that I'm going to use this project as an opportunity to teach you about. Constantly throughout all the lessons where we're building out this page, I will be stopping you and asking you to do things you've already done. So it's not just going to be following along with me. I do want you to be pushing yourself and learning while we're doing all of this as well. If you didn't get that Adobe XD link already, it will also be in the notes of the lesson too, just in case you don't want to have to try and worry about the slides or anything like that. So as promised, I put in all the content here, so that will definitely make your life a little bit easier. And let's go over to the CSS. We already have some CSS in here because, well, we did this when we did our navigation, right? We're going to leave this all here. It does make our life a little bit easier to work with because we've already set a few things up. Now, I'm not going to be constantly coming and looking at the layout throughout this, but I am going to have it open on my own screen on the side, like I'd encourage you to do with the link that I have shared you, because it's a lot easier when you're looking at it online. I will be opening it occasionally, but I don't want to constantly be opening and closing it just so it's, I think that'd be annoying for you. But whenever I'm sort of looking at bigger subjects or when we have to come and examine something, I want to explain myself, I will open up this slide just to take a little bit of look at it. But if I'm just grabbing font sizes or doing small things, I might just refer to as you can see in the slide or as you can see in the design. A lot of commonality that's going on in this. All of our titles are looking exactly the same. We have our continued reading. We just have the basic body and the setup of that. As I said, I like starting with global styles. I already mentioned this video is about the global setup. That's what I'm going to be focusing on. And of course, I've given you a whole bunch of the typography. Now, I didn't put the colors, but I showed you what it looked like. So I'm assuming you can figure out what color you need and stuff like that. So let's go and set all of that up. We already have our H1 and our subtitles set up here. So we might as well keep going to look at the title, but which I'm not sure now that is so easy. Put things on that. It really depends on the layout and the design that you're creating as well. Sometimes you only need these, you never have a class. Sometimes you have a lot more on your classes. I wish there was like, this is the answer that I could give you. One of the fun things I think with CSS is there is no this is the answer that I can give you, which can be very frustrating when you're learning, but I do want to show you that it's not all just like this cut and dry thing, and that if you didn't do this and you just put everything on the class, that'd be perfectly fine. There's not a problem with that. But if you find yourself repeating yourself, try and make combinations. And again, you're going to see, you could even have it H1, H2, H3, and then maybe, you know, have your article title in there as well as a selector. Even though that might be a bit redundant, maybe you're going to have an article title that's a paragraph for some odd reason, you never know. And you just want it for visual reasons and not necessarily for other reasons. You know, I could have my article title here as well as like another selector that's in that. Now, I'm not doing that this time because my H2s and my article titles are the same thing, but I'm going to leave it just like this for now. But if you're not too sure, either put everything on your class and you're completely fine. There's nothing wrong with working that way. It's how I worked for the longest time. But now whenever I find myself having to come and copy something, I'm just going to group it up here. And because this was just my regular H1 tag, I'm just sticking with H2, H3. But if I put my classes up there as well, that's completely fine and completely normal. You know what else is the same on all of them, actually, is the color.
Oh la 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 la.
Nice, easy one to do. Now I do have...
Hey, can we do JavaScript?
Font size, which I have is 1.125 rem. have a choice now of, this is my body, and then I have my typography grouped here. There are some people who will come and put like this and say body and put a font size down here as well. Again, I'm not doing it on my paragraph because I don't want it to only affect my paragraphs. I want it to affect everything 1.12 in them. So we need to style that. So article, read more, font size. I know I put those at the options. It's a little bit bolder than in my design. So in my, you can see there's an underline on it, and we don't want that underline to be there. So we can turn that off. Text declaration. Looking at, as I mentioned when we were looking fancier and nicer, is the space of my body on that one thing that I forgot, which is my font weight. Font weight should be 300. And actually, let's go look. I don't think it's working, and there's a reason why. It's because I didn't I didn't load it in with my Google Fonts, but I want to take this opportunity to show you a nice little trick. Sometimes you realize there's a font weight along the way that you didn't bring in or you didn't load when you were at Google Fonts. It's annoying if you close your tab to find the right font, to open up the little black bar thing, to go back to customize, get the link, copy it back. It's not.
Guys, I was wondering what C#, C++ difference. Object-oriented language. What the frick? Wow. So C is like
steps at all, but if you can avoid it, it's always nice. So when we're bringing in our Google Fonts, it's showing you that it adds the numbers here. It's just putting in the numbers and comma separating them. So if you forgot one and you want to add it in after, you can literally...
What is OOP versus component? Object oriented. What is component? By combining pre-existing and new component, which are the same way automobiles are built from others' component. I see.
Literally just come here and add it in like that. It's really, really simple, really, really easy. And now we have access to our 300 as well. So if we come and look, we should see, there we go. The fonts are nice and light, and they look much nicer. My continue reading is also looking okay. One thing I didn't do on that though was I made a bit of a boo-boo. I did not include a hover. So I'm going to come in and add a hover to it, and if we come back to it, it's getting that underline that's coming on there to do this for me. So I have my other thing to do. It's like a suite of words. Now you can see it's gotten super fat. Like, look at the difference there between this one and my link. Bold, where it looks good on your screen. Bold, that would be fine too. You're to use enough to do. With the font, we're good to go. In the next video, we can start with the layout.
Okay.
In this video, we're just looking at the big picture. I always start big picture. I know typography maybe isn't big picture, but as I mentioned, when you set up layout, things start looking good, then you change the type, things change again, then you go back to layout. So I always like doing typography first, then big layout, and then slowly working my way to like more and more like all the different smaller pieces of my layout, which we often call components. We have a few different components on this page. We have our widget component, our featured article component, and our recent article component. Is sort of how I'm going to break this page down, the same way that's how I look at it. So we need something that's going to hold the page in the middle, and then we need that to have two different columns on it, and we need to set those two columns to have the right sizes on them. A few decisions that have to be made now about a few different things. Now, one thing that we've already done, if we scroll down and we find where we did our layout, we already created a container. So that's pretty cool, because that means our content here is already inside of a container. It's already being held in the same place, because when we created this, we gave it that same container. So if I go really, really big now, I can't go, my content will stop growing at one point, which is awesome. So we don't have to worry too much about the container itself. The first thing I'm going to worry about is setting up those two columns though. So in my layout, come back actually, and we should look at our index. You're always going to be jumping back and forth between two of them unless you have a really good memory for your classes. We had my main, and my main is all my main articles, and then we had an aside right there, and then all my aside is that secondary widget on the side, and all of that is living inside of this container. Now the container, I don't want to give it a display flex because I might get other content inside of a container that I don't want to have a display flex on. So that's the same reason I had my container and my container nav here, and when I did that, it's because I wanted to make this container have a display flex on it. Now what I'm realizing is I'm coming in and I'm going to want to do the same thing here. So having container nav here wouldn't make a lot of sense. I could call it container main or main content, but why not come and give it a class like container flex? And
Container
the idea
flex.
here is I have a container, but I'm also making this container a flex box. If I do container flex there, and then I come up here and I change this one, the reason I'm changing that one now is because I'm going, oh, well, I want these two to have the exact same behavior. I might as well give them the exact same class. This might not work in every situation you run into. Because remember when we did this, we had display flex, but we also had this justified content space between. In this case, that's a good thing. It's exactly what we want because we want to push our two things as far apart as possible. So container nav, display flex, that's fine. We can just change this from nav to container flex. That means anytime we have a container, we need the display flex on with this justified content space between, we can reuse this class and we're modifying. So we have a normal container if we need it, and we can flex. You'd have sometimes you end up things, or you might realize simplify your life as much as possible. That's amazing. All the way up to the top where my bondnet live. I'm doing a display inline, which it is by default. It gets this space underneath that I'm not going to worry about why that happens right now, but what it means is when you're setting spacing on them, it doesn't always line up exactly by default. It is 100%. I'm also going to put a display of block on here. I'm doing it now not to confuse you, but just to say, I remember when I said images are usually displayed inline, it does lead to this issue where there's a small, when an image is displayed inline, which it is by default, it gets this space underneath that I'm not.
Yes, another hidden rules. That image always display inline. So now you have to override it with display block.
Don't worry about why that happens right now, but what it means is when you're setting spacing on them, it doesn't always line up exactly how you want it to. So this is like every site you ever do, literally. You might do something like this, where it just solves 98% of the problems you'll ever have with an image. We have one other thing we're going to do to deal with the cropping on them, but this is just like if you're setting up your images, these two things will just make your life a lot easier. So I sort of recommend always having this like body bit.
Need to check a quick list.
This image this, and then you're done. So if we go and take a look now, hey look, things have already gotten much better. I also made another mistake with my typography. We'll fix that when we get to our widgets though. The last thing I want to do is sort of set the proper sizes on those. So that was my main and my aside. So I'm definitely going to come down to my layout. Container is really sort of generic. Then I have my header. This is all header. We might as well go right here. I have my navigation. I have this in its own category. I might, depending on how you want to work, you might keep your navigation up here with your header stuff because the navigation's in there. I'm just going to come right here and say my main, and we have my aside.
Media queries.
I want you to set some sizes on this, see how it can look, and see if we end up agreeing on the sizes we're going to put on this. Alright, so on my main, on this one, I'm going to put a width of 75%, and on my aside, I'm going to give this a width of 20%. Let's go take a look. That might look a little bit wider than what we need. That's okay. I think overall we're sort of hitting what we need and what we want it to look like. So you can see it's working. Now we do need to build a breakpoint into this as well, right? Because, oh man, that sucks when we get to the small screens. Oh no, there's a problem with my navigation. I want you to try and fix it and see what it is. See if you can figure out what it is, because we had the right code. But now there's an issue. See if you can solve it.
Issue with that. Auto. Has to be centers, right? Display columns and then justified content. Flex direction column. Justified content. Centers. Line item, a line item. Where is it? Nav? This has to go there. So UL display flex. Justified content. Justified content. This space. So it's line items. Should be the nav, right? Should be the nav display flex. Hello? Yeah. Yeah. Display flex. Going to flex all of this out. It should be this container flex. Display flex, not nav UL. where display flex containers. Flex columns. Interesting. Align items. Centers. Yeah, but then it's not. It's columns. Yes, 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 yes. There we go. We are fine. Flex columns. Yes.
Things quickly and trying to put property on something, but you might look at that. We have that working wonderfully, but we've run into a problem of we still have the wrong widths on things. Now, these are using something called max width instead of min width, and I mentioned that we sort of want to be doing a mobile first approach to things instead of working from the big screen to the small screen. It generally makes your life a lot easier. You end up writing less CSS because the default becomes a bit more of your friend. So in the next video, we're going to explore how we can switch our min widths to a max width and a little bit of refactoring we can do. And then you're going to see how much easier it just makes it. So we're not overwriting as much. We can write a lot less code while we're doing it.
Right, I have to go somewhere now. Busy day, busy day. Okay, I will end the stream here and go back in like a few hours. Let's see how much we can do today. Hopefully we can do a lot.